Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, joined by a developer that I've been talking to for a couple of years now. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rafael, and I am one of the co founders of Not Suspicious and CEO.
And where are you calling in from today?
Today, I'm calling in from Finland. It's actually quite a sunny day, which is nice. Last time we spoke, I was still in Malta. Banners and Bastions did not exist, and Meta was still trying to push Horizon Worlds. So that was in January of last year.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed. Start at the beginning here in your path into VR. When did you first experience VR? Or when did you first hear about it?
So the first time I experienced VR was actually here in Finland as well, around 2013. I came here for an exchange. I was living in Kajaani in the center of Finland, and I think the university got one of the development kits for the Rift. And I had heard about the Kickstarter, and it caught my attention, but at the time, there's always a lot of like scams with Kickstarter and so on. So I was like, all right, we'll wait a little bit and see how this pans out. Then the university got a development kit, and I tried it. There was like this really talented programmer at the university that built like a little demo, like the sort of like the Finnish John Carmack. He built like a really cool demo, and I tried it out, and I was like, okay, huh. It was still a bit gimmicky at the time, but I could see that it was sort of like going somewhere. At that time I was actually immersed in like the mobile games industry. That's just to backtrack a little bit. I was doing my bachelor's degree in game design at that time. This was in 2013. My original university is in Portugal, where I am from originally. I'm Portuguese, but I learned about this program called Erasmus, and I wanted to do an exchange, so I ended up going to Finland. When I got to Finland, apparently they had already experienced success of Angry Birds here. The mobile games industry was sort of like taking off here in Finland at that time, and I didn't know anything about mobile games when I came to Finland. Even though I was in a game design degree in Portugal, I was just like making computer games. I didn't really know anything about. I didn't even have a smartphone, so I got here and I started getting like lectures about mobile games and stuff, and I'm like, what are they talking about? I bought a smartphone. I started building mobile games, and so that's what I was doing at that time, at that particular time. And of course, on the side, I also had another project. My original first game business was a MMORPG that I built with a very talented Dutch programmer, Sander, and it's still live, but I left in around 2017, 2018 when I started Not Suspicious. It's wartail.com if anyone wants to check it out. So that's how I was sort of like paying for college, because when I graduated high school in 2010, my parents were like already struggling a little bit with the financial crisis that hit us. The 2008 financial crisis like hit us pretty strongly here in Europe, and in particular for my parents. I couldn't afford to pay like the yearly tuition to go to college at that time, which was only like 700 euros. So looking back, it's like ridiculous. 700 euros a year, and I couldn't afford that. So I took like a gap year, and that's when my cousin told me like, oh, remember that like really old game we used to play when we were kids? Like there's a Dutch programmer that's like trying to reverse engineer it, and is like gonna like bring it back and so on. So I basically got in touch. Like I went to the online forum that my cousin sent me. I got in touch with the programmer. I started like sharing my ideas, and so that's how I sort of like developed my game design chops. It was on Wartail basically, and so that's sort of like the vehicle that I was using for paying my tuition and for going to Finland and so on and so forth. And then after I graduated, I did an internship for a company called Cool Games in Amsterdam, where I did more mobile game stuff. And on the side, I was always doing this MMORPG as well. So I was doing this MMORPG and mobile game stuff this whole time. But then by 2016, I started feeling like, I've been doing this MMO for basically 6 years now. The mobile games industry, I was sort of like, I wasn't really enjoying it. I was specializing my game design skills for monetization and things like this that I wasn't really a fan of. Remembered my experiences with VR. I remembered when I had first tried it, and I was like, well, let's look at how VR is doing again. And that was precisely the year that the Rift came out, the CV1, the consumer version of the Rift came out, and without even controllers, just an Xbox controller and so on. And I was like, okay, well, this could be interesting. I had finished my internship in Amsterdam, and I was back in Portugal. I was working for a company called Lisbon Works. They were also doing games. In my mind, I was like, I should probably figure out a way to go and stay for a few years to one of these countries where VR is really taking off. And there were two sort of like main candidates in my mind. It was the United States and China. In retrospect, I now realize that if I had gone to China, I would have been doing like hardware as opposed to software. So I went to the United States. I Googled, how to go to each of these countries, and it turns out there was like this program called the Fulbright program that would sponsor like graduate studies in the United States if I wanted to do that. So I applied for the Fulbright program. And they gave me a scholarship, and I ended up going to the United States, in particular to Orlando, Florida, where I did my master's at the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, which is part of the University of Central Florida. As soon as I got to Florida, I immediately started prototyping VR ideas because I didn't have access to any VR hardware back in Portugal, and I could have moved to. In fact, like Meta did not even ship to Portugal for the longest time. I could have moved back to the Netherlands or some other country in Europe and then ordered the VR there and stuff. But I was like, well, why not just go to the source, right? The academic environment was also a great choice because then I didn't have any constraints with regards to what I had to prototype, right? It's I'm doing a master's degree, I can just prototype whatever I want. And one of those prototypes that I put together with a couple of my classmates in September or October of 2017 was Tablecraft. Tablecraft was and is this science sandbox where you play with the periodic table of elements. It started just because I wanted to learn how to design for an immersive environment. Some of the constraints I had was I didn't want to have like artificial locomotion, so it was very much along those lines of like Job Simulator, where you stay in one place and you interact with the environment around you. The game sort of comes to you. After I built Tablecraft, the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, sometimes they would have like these tours of like nearby school children that would come over and just tour the academy to sort of like learn about game development, and so that they understood that like game development was a valid career choice for their future and so on. And the university would always ask me, "Oh, can you just demo Tablecraft?" Because I guess they really liked it, and the kids would always go nuts for Tablecraft. They would have to force them out of the headset because they loved it so much. And so that's when I first realized, okay, well, there might be something here. So I at that point I was like, okay, I don't have any funding. I'm literally a foreigner here in the United States. My time is like limited. I had, maybe 2 years before I had to go back because my master's degree was just 18 months. And so I was like, okay, well, I should probably look into how to stay, how to stay a bit longer and how to sort of like try to finance a company, perhaps. I went to the executive director of the building there, like the University of the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, Ben Dole, great guy. He was one of the devs on Ultima Online. He was the former chief operating officer of Electronic Arts in Austin. And like amazing mentor. That one of my best mentors. Him and Sander, the programmer that I worked with on the MMO. I would say they were like my two biggest mentors. And I went to him and I was like, Ben, if you sponsor like a Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy booth at the Games for Change conference that's going to happen in New York, I will go there with Tablecraft and I will make sure the university looks great. So he was like, all right, well, I'll think about it. And then, a few weeks later, he came back and he was like, okay, I'll get you a booth. You just have to get your own flights. You have to figure out the accommodation by yourself and so on, but I'll sponsor the booth. And so the university sponsored the booth. I went there with Tablecraft. My Tablecraft booth was right next to Jesse Shell's Shell Games booth. And they also, ironically, had a chemistry game that they were showing there at the time called HoloLab Champions. So our booth was like really popular. Players kept coming back to our booth because ours, like, Tablecraft was a little bit more playful than HoloLab Champions. And by the way, I'm a huge Jesse Shell fan. I just thought it was like really funny, the contrast that we, these janky students, we just went there and we had this booth with like these like quirky game, and we we were like right next to Shell Games, who at the time I thought of as like these big, really big players. They're still like a huge, very successful company in the VR space and outside of it as well, especially in the education space as well. And I just happened to give it, like, basically I happened to meet this guy that worked for the government there, called Edward Metz. Amazing guy. I don't think he works for the government anymore, but he was working for the Institute of Education Sciences, which is I think it's a branch of the Department of Education or something. He essentially was working like for the Department of Education, and I gave him a demo of Tablecraft, and he was like, "Wow, guys, this is amazing. You should totally apply for this grant, the Small Business Innovation Research Grant that we have. We hand out $1 million to every company every year, and so on." Which was something that Shell Games was known for getting. Like they were constantly getting those grants as well over there. That's how they were like bootstrapping a lot of their like educational games. And I was telling him like, well, I'm a foreigner. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be feasible and so on. He was like, no, just make sure you get like an American co-founder, and we'll everything will work out. So around that time, I already had my classmate Guillaume helping out with Tablecraft, but he wasn't fully on board until we had this opportunity to get like up to $1 million from the government for this project. And it seemed like the representative that we had met, like Ed Metz, he loved it. So we thought, okay, there might be a good chance here. So I was like, look, we start Not Suspicious. We go after this grant, and we use Tablecraft as sort of like our stepping stone for breaking into the VR space, and then we'll go from there, basically. And so that's what we did in September of 2018. We created Not Suspicious, and in December of that same year, we applied for a SBIR grant from the National Science Foundation, as well as one from the Department of Education. The Department of Education one was in January. And then in July of the next year, so in July of 2019, we got the phase one from the NSF, from the National Science Foundation. We got $225,000 to sort of like develop a pilot for Tablecraft. And the premise was we were going to try to figure out how to bring VR learning to the classroom sort of at scale and without, with minimal VR hardware requirements. So we wanted to design it such that, as long as you have one VR headset, you bring that one VR headset to the classroom, and then everyone else would be able to join this, join the same instance with their phones or their tablets or their Chromebooks or whatever. And the teacher would be able to monitor what the VR user is doing and so on and so forth. That was the whole premise. So that's how we started. That's how Not Suspicious started.
There's a lot to talk about here. Jesse Schell, I just did a podcast with him. You're right next to him again here on my podcast, and he's got like the longest story in VR, one of the longest stories going back to Aladdin's Magic Carpet Ride in the 1990s and working on realizing that, and all the way to today, where they're doing explorations with new technology. And when you started messing with this stuff, did you think it would take as long as it has taken?
No, I was incredibly naive. I thought it would evolve much, much quicker. Like, I remember being very frustrated with the rifts, especially because we started, in hindsight, it wasn't very smart to start in the education space, in the classroom space. It was a necessary thing for us because obviously it was our only path towards like getting funding and so on at the time. But if you want to like bring VR to the classrooms, you sort of like you need the hardware to be much, much better than even what it is today. And I had a lot of frustrations. Early on, it was obviously the lack of inside-out tracking. So we had to set up all these, towers for tracking the headset, and a lot of cables going everywhere. Of course, the expensive computers that we had to take to all the playtests, because we were doing many, many, many playtests in classrooms, like dozens of playtests. This was like around 2018, 2019, even 2020, right before COVID started. There was so much friction. At the time, I wasn't even like, the weight of the headset itself. First of all, the headsets were lighter, right? Because they didn't have the battery inside of it and so on and so forth. But yeah, the weight wasn't even the thing that was on my radar back then. It was just like, we need to get rid of all these cables. We need to, make sure that we have really good inside-out tracking, no expensive computer, and so on and so forth. So when the first Quest came out, I was very excited about that. Then I thought that from there, they finally figured out sort of like the pathway that people, the thing that we have to do. We have to build standalone VR that is not like cardboard. Because another thing that was really frustrating me at the time was that a lot of people were pitching the government VR, but they were including Google Cardboard in that. And that was so frustrating. Like anytime I spoke to anyone in the education space and they were like, oh yeah, we tried the chip VR that doesn't require the extensive computer. And I'm like, that's not VR. Yeah, you're putting a phone on like a cardboard holder on your face. That's not really, it's not sick stuff. So I constantly had to like sort of educate some of these like educators and like the teachers and explain to them that you're not getting like that presence, you're not getting interaction. Right? There was no controllers for the Google Cardboard. There was none of that stuff. And yeah, so that was a big frustration. I'm glad I'm glad we're past the era of smartphone VR and I just expected us to go from like Quest 2 to Quest 3, and I thought that Quest 3 was going to be like much lighter, much slimmer. Yeah, and then one of the things that sort of baffled me a little bit was when Meta then came out with the Quest 3S. I guess they hypothesized that the Quest 2 had been very successful because of the price point. And in their, I guess in their heads it was like, okay, well, the Quest 3 is too expensive, therefore we need like a headset with a Quest 3 chipset but with a Quest 2 price equivalent. But that baffled me a little bit because I don't necessarily think that what made Quest 2 really successful was its price. Sure, the price probably contributed, but I think it was really just Meta finally delivering on that vision of the first really good standalone VR headset. Right, like the Quest 1 was sort of like the prototype for that, and then the Quest 2 was sort of, in my view, sort of like the first real consumer headset that was like really good and standalone. And then the Quest 3 introduced mixed reality, which of course now I'm all in on mixed reality. Well, hopefully augmented reality eventually, but we'll see. We'll see if we get there and when we get there. And hand tracking. I remember Meta introduced hand tracking, I think even on the Quest 1. But at the time, the chip was so weak, and Quest 2 also very limited. Quest Pro, I also have a Quest Pro. Yeah, not a huge fan of Quest Pro either. Seems like it didn't really do very well. It was too expensive. Did not deliver like a significant bump in performance or anything like that. It's literally just a Quest 2 chip. So yeah, I mean, in my naive sort of like way of looking at the industry at the time, I thought we would have had much slimmer and much lighter weight like standalone headsets, which I believe is still like one of the biggest barriers to like VR adoption.
There's a lot to respond to there. Let's see, where do we go? Every product except the Quest Pro that Meta has put into VR has been priced between $200 and $600. And then you get a product like the Vision Pro that is priced in a completely different universe where we're at $3,500 and only professionals. We're only gearing this towards professionals. So Vision Pro has people detection, so you can see the other people that are in the physical room with you. It has eyesight, so you can make eye contact with the people who are in the room with you. They can know when you're looking at them because they see your eyes, your fake eyes, but still your eyes. And so like you're never truly disconnected from the physical reality that you're in because of those double features, the eyesight and the people detection. So there's this huge barrier right there that is software solved. I guess there's hardware as a big piece of that, but also this fundamental like Vision OS has this layer that will always keep you connected to your physical environment. You've got also the eye tracking in the headset as well as the pinch interface. And what I would love to see is the eye tracking pinch interface applied to frames similar to the Ray-Ban glasses, where if you apply the eye tracking and the hand tracking, in fact, to a pair of frames, you could have basically all of the input from the Vision Pro, but on any other computer in your household. So you're looking at your TV and you could pinch across your TV, or you could look at your laptop, which is just slightly out of reach, and maybe move a window around on it or close a window or hit the play button just by looking and pinching in the open air. If you applied the same interface scheme from the Vision Pro to a pair of just dumb glasses, like these things, all they do is they sense your intent. They sense what your eyes are pointed at. And they sense what other computers are in the room. And then they sense, your hand movements and your eye movements together to bring the system together. But I imagine all those extra sensors would push any kind of glasses Apple developed there that even if it had no display on it, would probably be in a different pricing category than the Ray-Bans. You're talking maybe $1,000 or more. I don't know. I don't really care to
Mhm.
to 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 dig into the components to understand exactly the cost. What matters is they exist in these different categories. Over in Meta, they have this top-down philosophy that comes straight from Mark Zuckerberg and his lieutenants, his vice presidents at the company and executive officers to develop things that are mass market. And it ends up being a little bit myopic, a little bit small minded to kind of approach this space from just, we have a thesis here, and the thesis is that VR is so awesome that a market is just going to bubble up around it. Instead of like this other approach of like, what do humans need to keep
Yeah.
themselves inside computers for a really long time, spatial computers for a really long time. So they've got Michael Abrash out there doing research on those subjects of testing out higher resolution headsets, high dynamic range headsets, lightweight headsets, varifocal
Yeah.
headsets
On
to
that
answer
topic,
those
real quick.
questions of exactly how does that affect.
No, just on that topic, real quick. Like, there's this great article that I love from Palmer Luckey, where he argues that free isn't cheap enough for modern day VR. And I agree completely. For most people, even if you just give them a headset, it will like within weeks or so, it will end up in their closet. The headset will end up in their closet. And I think it's a combination of many different things. Obviously, it's a combination of friction in the software that, like, there's a lot of friction that could have been addressed with the software. And I actually miss John Carmack at Oculus and at Meta, because he was the one that was, he was championing like removing as much friction as possible. And yeah, I feel like it was like definitely a great loss to the VR industry when we lost Carmack. But of course, then there's on the hardware side as well. I agree that even free isn't cheap enough yet.
Yes, totally on the same page there. And there's things in my reporting history here. I think it was 2015 that I filmed Carmack in a hallway at, I think it was the second Oculus Connect, and I only filmed him because everyone else around him was already filming him. I'm like, oh, I guess it's okay to film him. And so I'm standing there with my hand getting tired because he won't stop talking. He's speaking for 20 minutes and my arm is getting tired holding up the phone um, to try to capture this stream of consciousness he's blurting out. And it's getting to like minute 19 of this recording that I'm putting into my phone. And I'm like, I gotta ask my question. And my question is, what is going on with mobile positional tracking? And he offers up this just brutally honest comment that like I'm going to paraphrase it, of course, all these years later, but it's to the effect of, this is a problem I want solved right now, and we have all these researchers that we've hired from these computer vision companies, and they all want to work on their esoteric researchy things, and this is a problem I want solved right now. And from that takeaway, you get this impression that Meta had so much brain power in all these different teams and no leadership to align them on the projects that needed to be solved in the order they needed to be solved. So like 2017 is the example I've been bringing up quite a bit lately. 2017, I went to Valve's booth at GDC, and they had two demos running on modified HTC headsets, HTC Vives. One was from SMI, the eye tracking company SMI, and the other one was from Tobii outside of HTC's booth, I believe. Like in the Tobii one in particular, I think, there's like an eye tracking calibration step that you do at the beginning of using those systems. And you like point your eye in different directions when it tells you to, and it records where your eyes are pointed at that time. And based on that calibration, it is able to do high quality eye tracking. Well, you go into the Vision Pro and the eye tracking calibration step that you do at setup is very, very similar. Like it's much more refined. It's got the Apple sort of polish to it. If you were a user who didn't understand how any of this works, you have no idea why it's doing this. But what the headset does is it exposes your eyes to three different types of lighting, and then it has you point your eyes in the different directions. So what it's essentially doing is it's tracking what your eyes are pointed at in all the lighting conditions that your eyeballs can be exposed to while inside of this fully immersive headset. And from that, you get this very high quality eye tracking that is then used as the core of the Vision Pro interface. You go to the idea that I was talking about before of just glasses and trying to apply the same eye tracking technology into a pair of glasses. It's got to be orders of magnitude more difficult to track your eyes in the open air than it is in that enclosed space where they can control the amount of lighting hitting your eyes. You could have sunlight, you could have a pitch black, dark room. How do these little glasses track your eyeball movements in all of these scenarios? It's got to be massively difficult and more difficult than the other system. This starts to explain why you've got things like these Ray-Ban glasses that are in the same price range as the Oculus Quest 2 and 3S that you pointed out, but they're stripped bare. They're stripped down to just the barest of components. Like, let's just get a microphone on this thing. Let's put a camera on this thing. Let's put speakers on this thing. Let's send everything else into the phone and process everything on the phone and then in the cloud. And we'll have this relay system. And in that design, you end up centering Meta's cloud services as the sort of magic there of like, it's such a dream come true for Meta. Like, here's a system that requires our cloud intelligence. It sucks down all the local data so that we can process it and make use of it later. And we get to price things in the exact right pricing category that reaches mass market. And in its first year, where they're really putting good cameras inside this device, they supposedly sell 7 million of them. It's also not that interesting to me in the grand scheme of things. Like I really went hard there for a year and a half to 2 years of like, what is different about eye line capture videos, point of view capture videos, egocentric photos and videos? It's really magical to remove the posing that we've done for 150 years. I think of the word poser.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I know
such a
what you mean.
derisive term, and we can say goodbye to 150 years of poser videos and photos with that kind of photography. What were you saying there?
No, no, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I also purchased one of the Ray-Ban glasses. In fact, I purchased it initially because I wanted to record a trailer for Airspace Defender, but I wanted the first couple of seconds to be like me picking up the VR headset and putting it on my face. And so I was wearing the Ray-Bans on my face, and then I just like grabbed the MetaQuest 3 from my little coffee table, and, and then I bring it to my face, and that's how I recorded the first couple of seconds of the Airspace Defender trailer. But I have also used the Ray-Ban glasses to capture a lot of pictures on vacation. I do like how quickly I can just snap a picture without having to pull out my phone and unlock my phone and do the whole thing with my phone. That was cool. But now they've been sitting in the closet for a while. I haven't used them because, of course, there's always that friction where you have to charge them. It's another smart device that you have to charge, and I don't know. I also don't wear a smartwatch. I guess because for the same reason, it's just
Yep.
I feel like there's too much stuff that I have to charge all the time.
Yes, yes, and you nailed it there. You really, really nailed it. There's several questions that are unanswered about this whole market that Meta has kind of thrown its last hope into after the failures of their VR strategy here. Where, yeah, like I've got an Apple Watch. I've had several Apple Watches over the years, and each one of them has become more of a pain to charge up and put on my wrist than not, right? Like I've got to unlock it every time it goes onto the charger. Like I can't just put it on my wrist and have it be ready to receive messages. I got to unlock it, and I have to have the specialized charger everywhere I go to keep it charged. And it's like, how many watch charging stations do I need around my home? Is it just the one next to my bed? Like in theory, that works, but it doesn't. It's like, no, I actually need one at my desk. Then I can charge it up, and then I don't need to charge it that night. I can wear it for sleeping because I've had it charging at my desk while I work there for 4 hours. And so, like, I don't want to say the glasses are the same thing, but it has ended up in the same usage pattern. It's like you have to remember to put it on or put it in your pocket before you leave for the day. And what did Meta do? Now they have two wearables on their display glasses where you've got to keep the neural band charged and you've got to keep the glasses charged. And yes, the glasses fold down into this nice little compact thing, but like it doesn't have that entire product category doesn't have any of the things that I love about virtual reality.
Exactly.
The presence and the escape and the embodied interactions that are just so magical. I want to bring it back to VR here for a minute and hear about Airspace Defender a little bit. How did the idea for Airspace Defender come together and when did you start working on it?
Yes, so in early 2024, I was feeling pretty burned out from tablecraft, and I reached out to my contact at Oculus Start, Rita. Shout out to Rita, by the way. She's awesome. She's amazing. And I asked her, could you send me a Quest 3? I just flat out asked her, could you send me a Quest 3? Because I would like to try out the mixed reality and the hand tracking stuff. And she got back to me and she was like, I could send you a Quest Pro. And I was like, no, 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 I don't want a Quest Pro. I have a Quest Pro already and it's not very good. So I'll just wait until you guys can send me a Quest 3. And she never replied to that email, but a few months later, I got a Quest 3 in the mail. I tried this amazing app by Zach Reed called Piano Vision. So I actually went on Amazon and I bought like an 81 key like foldable piano just so I could like try it out, try to connect to the headset and to see how did this app work, Piano Vision. And to my surprise, it worked really well, especially when connected by cable to the headset. Of course, you could also like sort of lay over like the virtual piano over your piano without messing around with any cables or whatever. But if you want like fidelity and if you want like really good feedback of when you press a key on the piano, then the software actually responds to that and so on and so forth. Then I would recommend connecting it via cable. And so I tried that. And the last time I had played the piano was when I was a kid. I had like a small little like electronic piano thing, like one of those cheap ones. And I played around with it. I never really, I'm not a piano player. I don't actually play any instruments, but I've always loved the piano and I've always wanted to learn instruments. And when I saw Piano Vision, I thought, this is amazing. It's the kind of experience that I think, going back to our previous conversation about like what exactly is going to sell VR, it has to be the types of experiences that you can only do in VR. And there are phone apps or whatever where you can like learn to play the piano, but it's not the same when you're wearing the headset and you see the notes sort of like coming in and you press the keys and everything is spatial. It's amazing. And so very quickly, within like 15 minutes of trying Piano Vision, I was playing songs and I was shocked by that. Like I was like, okay, this is basically the future. This is like the Matrix thing where you download Kung Fu onto your brain or whatever. And so, yeah, at that time I was completely sold on mixed reality. Piano Vision basically sold me on mixed reality. Well, hand tracking, not so much. They didn't really have much hand tracking there. But yeah, it sold me on mixed reality. That's true. And then shortly after that, like Rita reached out again via email and she said, we're going to be hosting this hackathon, the Meta offices in New York, and we'll fly you out if you want, get you the accommodation and so on. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds great, actually. That's a great opportunity. This was 2024. She reached out like in March or something. Then I reached out to Guillaume, who at this time was already taking a break from Not Suspicious for a few years. He was just working on a flat, because Guillaume, my co-founder at Not Suspicious, he's never been as interested in this medium as I am. Like he's really, when he went to the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy where I met him, his goal was to just become a game developer. Like he's just a gamer. He loves games. Whereas I went there specifically to get access to VR hardware and so on and become sort of an XR developer. And so Guillaume had already taken a break from tablecraft. He was gone for a few years, but I reached out back to him and I told him, look, man, there's like this Quest 3 now. They have, it's pretty interesting technology. Pass-through is like pretty decent. The hand tracking is decent, and in a few years we might have augmented reality glasses. So would you like to come to this hackathon in New York with me? And then I went to John, our 3D artist, and I did the same thing. And, I pitched basically. I pitched Guillaume, John, and James, three people, and they all came with me to New York for this hackathon at Meta's offices. Same hackathon where Pencil was created, an app that I know you love and I love as well. So when we got there, we were sort of like brainstorming, okay, what can we develop for these hypothetical future AR glasses? So it has to be, let's do something that's like fully focused around hand tracking, so no controllers. Let's do something that is like pass-through native, right? So let's not like bother with the VR stuff for now. Let's just do like something that's like fully in pass-through. And let's do something that doesn't take much of a field of view, because the field of view is going to be constrained in these eventual, hypothetical AR glasses that we'll have in the future. We're not going to have this wide field of view that we have today, at least not initially. And simultaneously, I was also interested in a type of gameplay that would push hand tracking to its limits. I wanted fast gameplay. Like I remember prompting the team, like, it would be good if the gameplay was like really fast so that we could just sort of like have this sort of benchmark for the quality of hand tracking, in the same way that like Beat Saber was the benchmark for controller tracking at Oculus. I wanted to understand, okay, like how fast can the gameplay be in hand tracking? And of course, this was at a time when we were all skeptical of hand tracking. Like I remember I don't know if the Apple Vision Pro had already come out in 2024 or if it had already been announced or something. But if it hasn't, it probably was like shortly after or something. And I remember there was a lot of people were like, "What? No controllers? That's strange. How are we gonna build any games for it?" And so on and so forth. And so in my mind, I was like, "Well, there has to be something it has to be possible to design games for hand tracking." And so maybe there were already rumors or something. If the Vision Pro hadn't come out yet, maybe there were already rumors or something. Because I vividly remember thinking, well, it has to be possible to design like games for hand tracking. So we were there at the hackathon, and Guillaume mentioned Missile Command. Like he mentioned the point-and-click mechanics of Missile Command. And as soon as he told me that, like everything clicked for me as well. Because of course, like the point-and-click mechanics, yes, that's a great fit. Missile Command, yes, it's a cool idea. But also in my mind, I was like, of course, like that's a perfect fit for this medium, because Missile Command itself is an abstraction of the real world. Like it's a 2D version of warfare, which is 3D in the real world. And so I was like, okay, so we can now actually create like a 3D version essentially of Missile Command, which is going to be much closer to what warfare actually looks like in the real world. Yeah, it just I don't know, it just felt like a perfect fit. We built it in a couple of days. There at the hackathon, we didn't win. I don't think we were not even in the top 3 or anything like that. But we were one of the very few apps to come out of the hackathon that actually got published. Of course, Pencil was another one, and Living Room was another one, and I think these were the only 3 that came out of the hackathon. So yeah, that's how Airspace Defender came to be.
Got it. Do you use the Meta Interaction SDK?
Yes, we had to use all of the Meta like SDK stuff, not OpenXR, because they wanted us to use their tools, and in fact that was one of that actually slowed down our ability to port to other platforms, because right now we're in the middle of trying to adapt it to other platforms, and yeah, we have to like take out all of that Meta stuff and make it a little bit more platform agnostic.
You know what question's coming next. You're already starting to say it, but Apple Vision Pro, what is the roadblock for putting Airspace Defender, or Tablecraft for that matter, on Vision Pro?
Yeah, so I'm happy to report actually that I tried the Vision Pro for the first time last week. So we're probably gonna get into this very soon. But my current team has just relocated to Finland, and it was. I'm sure we'll jump into their story at some point. But it was a crazy like movie-like journey. One of the things that they brought was an Apple Vision Pro. So I tried it for the first time, and I'm familiarizing myself with it. We'll see. I don't want to commit to it, but there isn't really any like technical barriers. We could do it if we had, if it was sort of like a business priority for us, which at this very moment it's not, just because we gotta like try to pay the bills, and so we have a few other things that we're trying to do. But yes, there's really no barriers at this point.
Well, there are barriers. I mean, like there's economic ones, right?
Well, yeah, economic barriers, sure.
Well, like, and you said you tried it. So what did you think? What was your first impressions of finally going there, basically?
It's fascinating. Like, at the same time, yeah, you can tell that it feels really premium and it feels really amazing to hold, right? But at the same time, it's heavy, right? Like so the moment you grab it, you're like, oh, okay, this is a very heavy headset. Then of course, the eye tracking calibration, the UX of all of that, I thought was fantastic. I love, obviously, the motorized IPD adjustment. I think that's something that I've been like pushing since, I think, even 2020 or something. Another thing that I've been pushing since 2020 is the ability to set up a Meta Quest headset without having to install an app on your phone. Like, I've always thought that these headsets should be standalone devices where, you just put them on your face and then you're like setting it up, like sort of like a console, like the Switch. When you buy a Nintendo Switch, you don't need to like download the Nintendo Switch app or anything like that to set it up. And I always thought it was fairly strange that that you had to do that with Meta. Of course, I understand. I understand why they want to like push. Yeah, they want to have like push notifications and all that stuff. But I don't know. Like this, I think of like these headsets as like standalone devices, and I think it would be beneficial for Meta to think of them more in that way as well. And I say Meta, but also I'm talking about like all the other ones as well. With Apple, I don't remember. I actually don't know if you need to download any app on your phone to set it up, because when my teammates gave it to me, it was already set up. But I still went through the motorized IPD adjustment, which I thought was fantastic. I went to the eye tracking calibration, which worked really well. I'm still getting adjusted to the eye tracking, like this idea that you're doing sort of like indirect interactions, because I'm used to very direct hand interactions on the MetaQuest ecosystem, where like I poke things with my fingers, or I have a laser pointer that comes out of my fingers, and then I pinch. Whereas on the on the Apple Vision Pro, you just look somewhere, and then your hand can be anywhere. It's completely irrelevant where your hand is, as long as it is within, as long as the cameras can see it. You just pinch. Yeah, I'm still getting used to that. Like sometimes there were times where I had to consciously make this effort of like, oh right, I wanna click this button, so I actually have to look at it. And yeah, there's definitely an adjustment period there. But of course, pass-through quality incredible. The anchoring of the virtual objects seemed completely flawless from what I've experienced so far. Yeah, I'm looking forward to spending more time with it. I actually have it right here next to me. But I also didn't have any I didn't find any issues with having a battery pack, like a tethered battery pack. Like I think that's a totally valid and reasonable like path forward for future hardware. Like if Meta came out with their next iteration of hardware that was, let's say, just like something closer to glasses, and then if they put the computer and the battery inside of a puck, I think that would be totally fine with me. Particularly for these like more seated use cases, right? Use cases where you're not like swinging your arms around or whatever. I think that's totally fine, essentially. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to try it some more, but yeah. It's a great device, it seems.
Interesting. All right. I want to talk about Banners and Bastions, which is your most recent game, and your path to building that.
So after Guillaume and I shipped Airspace Defender in early access, we released a bunch of updates for it, but we didn't really find the product market fit that the development for endlessly or whatever. And so we started like brainstorming, okay, what could be some of the next projects that we have this thread on our Discord called Future Game Ideas. So basically ideas for future games that we might want to develop. And one of those ideas that I had pitched to Guillaume in one of our calls was a game called Bed North. So there's this game on Steam, fantastic game, and I think they're also on the Epic Store, called Bed North. I think actually it might be, I could be totally wrong here, but I think it might be by the same developer who did Townscraper. And it's a great game, great little game. I had that in the back of my mind because Guillaume and I wanted to do something with deeper strategy after Airspace Defender. And we actually like started working on a campaign for Airspace Defender that was supposed to have more strategy, like a strategy layer and so on. But unfortunately, it never really went anywhere. And then we sort of like decided that it was best that we just like take a little pause and figure out what to do next. And Guillaume actually went and got a job at Blizzard and so on. So So, that's great. March of 2025. Someone reached out to us on LinkedIn, on the Not Suspicious LinkedIn, and they sent a video of this very bare bones prototype that they had developed at the time, but that I could already tell was inspired by Bad North. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, these guys are like literally building the thing that I want to build. And so this was Sahand, who is from Iran, and his team. They had a games company in Tehran that was doing mobile games. And then ironically, they bought this Apple Vision Pro secondhand from a guy. So apparently there was like an Iranian guy living in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or whatever. And that person bought the Apple Vision Pro to try to build something for it, but then they never did. So that person went back to Iran, and then Sahand, my teammate, and his team, they decided to buy this secondhand Apple Vision Pro. So they bought it, and that was their first foray into VR, essentially. Up until that moment, they had never done anything VR. They had a mobile games company, and apparently they were doing quite well in the mobile games space. But again, they, like me, many years before, they were feeling like mobile games are not really the thing that they want to be doing for much longer, because it's sort of like a little bit of a race to the bottom, and it's a weird space to be in if you want to do interesting game design. And so they participated apparently in this like a hackathon with the Vision Pro. While Guillaume and I were building Airspace Defender, they participated in some hackathon with the Vision Pro, and apparently they got like, I think it was second place or something. So that gave Sahand and his team like the confidence that they had something to say in the VR space. And so then in January, before I even met them, in January of 2025, they started working on this little prototype for a strategy game inspired by Bad North. And then in March of 2025, they sent me a little video on the Not Suspicious LinkedIn, where they basically explained that they're inspired by what Guillaume and I had done with Airspace Defender. And and so in that video, they already had like a little dome. Like I could see that they already had like the Airspace Defender dome, and they had like the pinch and drag mechanics where you just grab the banner and move the banner around. And I was like, okay, I see what you guys are doing. So I asked Guillaume, do you want to be involved in this? And it was like, no, I'm going to go back to my flat games. Basically Guillaume once again was like, well, I'm not really interested in the VR space. So he took another break and got a job at Blizzard. And so I reached out to Sahand and I was like, look, I'm very interested in what you guys are doing. Let's work on it together. Though, of course, that was once again very naive, because when he sent the video, I didn't even realize that he was from Iran. But then, like within a few days or within a week or something, I realized, oh God, these guys are all from Iran. And his team is, so it's Sahand, it's Pardis, his wife, and also our 3D artist, and then there was Alireza and Amir. So it's a team of 4. So yeah, in March they reached out, they sent that video, and then I proposed to them, let's work on it together informally. Of course, we can't have any, because of export controls and because of Not Suspicious is a US based business. We can't necessarily really be working with Iranians. There's export controls. There's sanctions essentially. And so I was like, well, look, we're gonna like just have this informal collaboration thing where you and I will just sort of like informally work on this project, but there's no money will ever exchange hands. We're not gonna have any contracts signed. We're not gonna have any of that stuff until I manage to bring you guys to Europe. And so yeah, they agreed, and we started working full time together on Banners and Bastions together. Yeah, So yeah, we were doing that, and then in June of last year, just as we were getting the early access build ready for release, which came out later in August, I think we were probably working on the Upload VR Summer Showcase video as well at that time. Just as we were doing that, the first bombs started dropping there in Tehran, in what became known as the 12-day war, where Israel and the US bombed the nuclear sites in Iran, but also there was one ordnance that fell like within a couple hundred meters of where the team was working in Tehran, like just within like, I don't know, like 500 meters or something of where they were working. So then they left Tehran at that time, and they went to another town nearby, which was a little bit more quiet, less bombing. And Yeah, and it was a challenge because apparently every time there's something like this, then there's a communications blackout. So I lost touch with them for some time. But luckily at that time, it was only a 12-day thing, and they didn't bomb Tehran that much, just a little bit, and so we managed to sort of come out in early access. Then we kept updating it, we kept releasing updates, and we came out. Banners and Bastions came out of early access in December. Of course, all of it just published by Not Suspicious, and the team this whole time working completely unpaid, nothing, no money changed hands, no agreements, nothing in place, just complete trust. They just completely trusted me that I would not screw them over. And yeah, with the game that they had been working so hard on, we both worked on it. But yeah, like it's quite amazing in retrospect to think about. Yeah, and then we started filing paperwork. I wrote a few recommendation letters for them. Like they started looking into how can we like relocate the entire team to Europe so that we can, so that I can like pay them and we can like make the whole thing official, right? They had a couple of options, the Netherlands and Finland. And when they told me Finland, I was like, oh, you guys should actually go to Finland. Finland is a great country. I've lived there in between 2013 and 2014. I loved it, and if you guys get accepted to go to Finland, I will move there as well. So, of course I had to pitch it to my partner as well, Agatha, and I was like, would you be okay if we move to Finland so that I can like work in person with the team if they get accepted and so on? And she was very supportive of that. And yeah, Agatha and I moved to Finland in February, at the end of February 26th. I think the team got accepted on February 27th. So like their residence permits got approved on February 27th to come to Finland. And then on February 28th, the current war broke out in Iran. So I lost all communications with them for, basically for the vast majority of the time that the war was ongoing, and it's still ongoing. Yeah, and right now we still cannot get in touch with some of the people that are still there. So earlier this month, Sahand and Pardis, two of my teammates, they started the journey to come here. They took a bus in Iran that was like a 20-hour bus ride all the way to the border with Armenia. Then they had to cross to Armenia on foot. And then from there, once they got to the capital, Yerevan, they got on a flight to Istanbul, I think, basically to Turkey. I think it was Istanbul. And then from there, they flew to Helsinki, where I went, and I just picked them up a few days ago. I'm super relieved that part of the team is finally here. They're very they're very happy to be here, safe and sound, and we are just now restarting. We're just trying to get in the flow again of doing the things that we were trying to do. Because at the time when they started getting bumped, we were brainstorming a new project. We were going to start a new project, but I think that the timing on that now has been pushed back a little bit, and we're probably just going to try to focus a little bit on Banners and Bastions and Airspace Defender again, and see if we can like release some updates there, just to give us a little bit more of a safety net before we try to gamble again on like a new project. Yeah, and today, Monday, April 20th, one of our other teammates and his wife, so Alireza and his wife, they just began the same journey. So they just got on a bus today, and they're going to go to the border with Armenia, then they're going to cross on foot, then they're going to go to Turkey, and then from there, fly to Helsinki, where I will pick them up on Thursday, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan. And and then there's still one last person over there in Iran that we'll see if we can, we'll have to file some more paperwork for them as well. But it's been a challenge, it's been a challenge. Of course, I can't speak for them. Obviously, they've had it much worse, right? Because they were the ones actually getting bumped. But it's definitely been a challenge to try to ship Banners and Bastions and try to continuously update it and so on.
So did you go to Finland to meet with them? Was that the plan all along?
Yeah, I moved here on purpose so that I could be here to welcome them to Europe, basically. Yeah, my partner and I, Agatha and I, we moved here, and we're staying with friends. We're sort of like subleasing the upper floor of a house from some of my friends that live here in Finland, and we moved here literally on purpose to just be here when the team finally comes. And yeah, I'm glad they finally did, because it's been great. I've been showing them around, and well, at least part of the team has arrived, and yeah, it's I can't express just how happy and grateful I am that they actually are safe. And yeah, and now hopefully we can like officialize everything and roll them into Not Suspicious officially, and and hopefully they can start getting their story out there as well, which previously they couldn't, because we were not really allowed due to sanctions and so on. But now they're in Europe, so none of that matters anymore.
Did they receive a paycheck from you when they arrived?
Yes, I've been. So they still have to open up bank accounts, but they open up a Revolut account, and I've been already sending them a little bit of money. Yeah, they haven't received the full amount just yet, because they have to open up bank accounts, like physical bank accounts.
So how did you feel upon seeing them arrive? Was it at an airport where you met them? And take me to that moment.
Yeah. So I went. So Agatha, my partner, she also took a day off to go with me to Helsinki to pick them up. I had promised that I would go and like pick them up in person to just make sure that everything goes well, and at least they have someone who's European there to I don't know, just in case something happens or whatever, I can at least vouch for them or something. So we took a train ride we took like a 1.5-hour train ride to Helsinki. Then we got there. They landed at 1 p.m. and we got there at 1 p.m. as well. But then they were questioned for a very long time, and then we only, I was actually getting super concerned that they might send them back. But then after 2 hours, they came out, and I saw them for the first time, and yeah, it was great. It was amazing. It was a huge relief to see them, and they stayed here with us, and they slept here on the floor, on a mattress on the floor for the first night. Then I rented an Airbnb for them, just like short-term accommodation until the end of this month. Right now we're in the process of trying to sign a lease for an apartment, so that they can a 1-year lease, so that they can have like a more permanent place, basically, because right now they're still staying in short-term accommodation. And I'm gonna have to repeat the entire process again on Thursday when Alireza arrives. It's probably gonna stay here at my place again for 1 night, sleeping on the mattress on the floor, him and his wife. Then we'll probably get an Airbnb for him as well. Then then we'll try to rent a flat, like sign a lease for like a flat, so that they can have more of a permanent accommodation. But yeah, I mean, it's been super challenging, but now I think the worst part is over. Well, at least for some of them. Of course, there's still people that are on their way.
Whew. You said it was great, but I mean, was that an emotional first meeting for you and them?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was glued, like, for this. It was also a relief, because for me personally, it was also a huge relief, because for this past month and a half or whatever, the time since the war started, every single day, every couple of hours, I was checking the news just to see what was going on. Because, like I said, there was a communications blackout between, in Iran, so they couldn't communicate with the outside world. And when we started seeing the military buildup in the Middle East, I actually thought about it for a brief moment there. Like in February, I thought about it. Well, maybe I should send them like a Starlink terminal, just in case like the war breaks out, and then we can at least stay in touch and so on. But actually, it is a crime to be caught with a Starlink terminal in Iran. The best case scenario is you end up in prison for 2 years. That's like your best case scenario if you get caught with a Starlink terminal. So I didn't do that, and so I didn't have any communications, right? And so I would see the news like every day. I was checking the news every day, and I was seeing like the bombing in Iran, like in Tehran specifically, where the team is from. Tehran, the capital of Iran. They have an office there. They lived there, and yeah, it was just getting completely bombed by Israel and the U.S. and I was like, well, like that's extremely concerning. I was constantly trying to check like the specific locations of where the bombs were dropping, just to see if what was getting damaged, what was not getting damaged. Just try to pinpoint exactly what could it be that they were hurt or not. Yeah, that was extremely stressful. Like, of course, not as stressful as actually being there and getting bombed, but still, not knowing what was going on to them, what was happening to them was extremely concerning. And of course, now they themselves are in a similar situation, right? Where Sahand and Pardis, they are here in Europe now. Thankfully, they have arrived, but they have a hard time communicating with their families back in Iran and their friends and so on. And and they showed me some pictures of their family and friends. They took them to the bus to say goodbye and stuff, and it was very wholesome. Another thing that's like that's tragic is that they basically had to leave everything behind. They came with like, I don't know, 3 suitcases or something like that. Like they didn't come with much stuff, with a whole lot of stuff. They barely had anything when they came. They don't have any, like, they don't have many clothes. They were not able to bring their computers because they actually had an office in Tehran where they worked, and they had desktop computers and monitors, all the whole setup basically that you'd expect from an office. And all of that stayed behind. And Sahand was actually telling me yesterday, or on Saturday rather, that he was actually getting a call from Alireza, the other guy that just started the journey today. Alireza was trying to sell the computers to someone else over there. So they, there are a lot of things that they weren't even able to sell or get rid of, or I don't know. It just, it's I'm still digesting the whole situation. It's still very very fresh.
Yeah. I appreciate you talking with me in the middle of it. Quite a human journey here, a very individual journey. It's very disconnected when you start seeing it on TV. You don't have faces or humans or work that they're doing to attach to these things that you see. And it lets, when you don't have those individuals in your mind, it ends up being very easy to sort of categorize what's happening in a disjointed way. Like there's no humanity attached to what is just on TV. And you've given a lot of that context today. So I want to know how much money you've been able to make on the Quest ecosystem, or at least how many sales you've been able to make on the Quest ecosystem for Airspace Defender and Banners and Bastions.
It's been in the 4-digit units, so a few thousand units. Not more than 10,000. I can say that combined. And I'm combining like Airspace Defender and Banners and Bastions. So not a whole lot of units sold.
And what are the prices of each of those games?
$99 USD.
So both of them $9.99 and under 10,000 units sold.
Yeah.
That does give us an understanding of the scale. And the reason I'm asking that is because I wanted to have a marker in the sand here of you put in some amount of work into putting these on, like this hypothetically, you put in some amount of work to putting these on this headset that has orders of magnitude fewer units in the market than the Quest 3 and the Quest 2. Do either of those apps work on Quest 2? I didn't ask that.
Yeah. They both work on Quest 2. Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking potentially 25 million headsets out there or something like that your software can run on, and you've been able to garner less than 10,000 units for projects that, to my eyes, are a perfect fit for the medium, but they don't have platforms behind them. They don't have software built for their design. You've built these. I've had people like Thomas Van Bowel on this podcast talking about cubism, and he's talking about cubism being this perfect like Rubik's Cube that should just sit on your desk over there as this toy that you can pull out at any time. I see the same design idea in these other projects. You should be able to have Airspace Defender just sitting out on your desk, or Banners and Bastions just sitting out on your desk. And when you want a few minutes of playtime with these toys, it's just right there. You hit hit resume on the menu, and you're now battling missiles coming for your cities.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want that, right? Like you want that to exist.
Mhm.
But what is the amount of effort that your team, like if you had to estimate it or put a budget out, what are the tasks that have to be solved? Your first one was you need the headset right next to you. So, okay, the headset is sitting right next to you. But from here, if you had to estimate the number of hours, how many hours is it? And what are they spent doing to put it on that device?
We started brainstorming ideas for our next project, just to see if we could, get more of a safety net before we take a gamble on some of these other platforms. But then Then our main priority became just making sure that the entire team relocates to Europe, just for their safety and so that we can be more synergetic in person. Working in person is always like better than working remotely. And so that's been our number one priority this whole time. These past few days, some of the I haven't really been able to work at all. I've just been showing them around the town, like showing them where the grocery stores are, like showing them where they can go and ask questions about like their visa, how to get like the insurance that they need for signing a lease, and like just regular day-to-day things that you have to do when you move to a different country. And even I am doing some of these things as well, even though because I've only been here now for less than 2 months in Finland with my partner, and we're hoping to buy this house that we're living in and so on. So there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff that we have to do. So yeah. So for the coming weeks / month, we're going to be doing a lot of that, just like a bunch of paperwork on ensuring that the team is like fully relocated and settled, and everyone is like ready to get back to work, at full time and so on. But in parallel to that, we were fortunate enough to sign a few porting contracts with Pico. I think I don't even remember when we signed it, but it's been a while, and we're overdue on those contracts because we didn't expect like a war to break out, and we didn't. I mean, I guess we kind of did expect it when we saw the military build up, but we, I don't know, we just didn't. Yeah, we didn't really plan properly, I guess. We didn't really realize that we were not going to be able to meet our commitments, and so our first order of business is going to be to release release Banners and Bastions, and then Airspace Defender on the Pico store. We already have them listed as coming soon because Pico was very generous. Like the support, they've committed to pay as a porting fee, and they've been like very supportive in general. They've been like very kind. They were like, oh, don't worry, like we understand. I'm sorry that the war, like this whole, you guys are dealing with this whole war situation right now and stuff. But yeah, so they're just waiting for us to finalize that. So technically speaking, we've already done it. Like I think in the next few days I will be submitting the final build to Pico for them to review, to like approve it basically. And so then Banners and Bastions should be on the Pico store like fairly soon, like I think by the end of this month or maybe like first week of next month or something like that. Then I want to make sure that we get Airspace Defender out of early access and also on the Pico store. So that's also something that's happening in the next couple of months, just because and again, Pico, the reason Pico has priority is because they've committed to like pay us a porting fee. There's going to be an update that's going to come out simultaneously to the Pico release. It's going to come out on the MetaQuest store as well, and it's going to introduce 9 new languages. So we've translated the game into 9 new languages, Banners and Bastions, and of course Airspace Defender is also currently in the process of being translated. So we're still trying to do some of these basic things where we want to translate the game into more languages so that we can see if we increase the number of units that we're selling and so on and so forth. I was talking to Oculus Publishing, and Oculus Publishing has been very they've been very what's the word that I'm looking for? Supportive of our work. They love the things that we're building, and we were very close to signing a deal with Oculus Publishing last December. But then, of course, in January there was a bloodbath at Meta. Like they basically laid off a bunch of people, and so yeah, and that fell through. We'll see if I can like sort of reconnect with them and see if we can like secure some funding there. Apple, I still haven't gotten in touch with anyone at Apple that would be interested in like funding games. I don't know if they even are interested in funding games, but if they are, and if they are listening to this, that would be very helpful. That would be like one way for us to justify and say, okay, we're going to put it on the Apple Vision Pro next. That's going to be our next priority is Apple Vision Pro. If we had like a commitment from them, that would be very helpful. And yeah, so that's going to be the next couple of months. It's just getting these 2 projects on more platforms, prioritizing the ones that are paying a supporting fee and expanding it to more languages. And And then hopefully we'll see. Maybe Apple Vision Pro, maybe a next project after that. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where it goes, where it takes us.
Wonderful. That was a whole lot of context. I do want to just push on one more thing of because the Vision Pro platform is so different from Pico. I've heard very good things about Project Swan. I do think it's likely, I don't have this firm, but it does seem like it's in a different pricing category than we're used to when it comes to projects. So it'd be really curious to see what kind of market adoption it has. But going back to what I was trying to say with AVP and Apple Vision Pro, you've got Metal, you've got Reality Kit, you've got the shared space, and these Unity Polyspatial, all these tools that are very different
Yeah,
inside
yeah.
of the AVP ecosystem. And then you've got the Meta Interaction Toolkit that you use in order to interact with Meta devices. And I assume that also extends pretty easily to other Android-based devices. Time-wise, if you just had to put like an estimate on the number of hours that your team has to throw at putting a project from this Android ecosystem, this Meta ecosystem, into Apple ecosystem, guesstimate, number of hours that are required from your team to do that.
I think it would take us around like 2 months like per project. Well, let's say for Banners and Bastions, because Banners and Bastions is already like sort of like more robust and more robustly built than Airspace Defender. It's more platform agnostic and stuff. But I think it would still take us around like 2 months to really adapt to the Apple SDKs and I don't know, figure out the whole situation with the leaderboards and just it would definitely take around 2 months at least. And that's just like a guess.
And that's dedicated work. Like you couldn't be doing other things during those 2 months. It would take basically the vast majority of your time.
It would take the vast majority of the time of whoever, maybe like one or two people who would be sort of like in the trenches doing that. Of course, we could have, let's say, the 3D artists could be doing other things and someone else could maybe be releasing updates on the MetaQuest or something. But we would only need like one or two developers on the port to the Apple Vision Pro. But then, there's always like a little bit, there's like QA involved, right? So you have to like also test it. And sometimes you're like unhappy with something and you got to go back to the drawing board. And now that we've essentially completed, on the technical side, we've essentially completed the port to Pico. We have a better idea. So it took us, I think the port to Pico took like a month or so. Because of course, at the same time, we were doing translations as well. So I guess that added some time there. I think for Apple, it would take a little bit longer just because it's such a different ecosystem. But it's still not like, it's not an insurmountable obstacle. It's like it would be done fairly trivially if we just had the funding to do it, essentially.
I appreciate all of that detail there. Thank you so much for the time, Rafael, and we'll continue this podcast with other members of your team. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I very much look forward to hearing your conversation with Sahand and hear about their perspective of this journey that they've made.
Why don't you tell me where you are right now?
Hey, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm sitting in an Airbnb in Salo, Finland right now, and I believe Rafael was talking to you about a week ago. And so, here I am now.
I talked to Rafael a little bit, heard a little bit about your journey from him. You're Iranian, is that right?
That's true. That's true.
And I heard you got a Vision Pro while you were in Iran. I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And I'd also like to hear about your journey into VR development. What was your first experience with virtual reality?
Sure. So it's all a very long story. So back in Iran, I used to run a mobile game studio, and a lot of the things I'm about to say about VR and mixed reality could be framed from the mindset of a ex-mobile developer. And so we had this studio back in Iran, and when the Oculus Rift came out, I'm not very good with dates, but we tried really hard to get our hands on maybe the first Oculus Rift that we found in Iran. And since then, we have been sort of waiting for the right moment to get into XR. Of course, back then you had to connect the whole thing to a beefy computer. And we were thinking, well, maybe now is not the best time for mainstream XR yet. But it was around like a year and a half ago that we saw somebody actually had a Vision Pro in Iran, which could have been maybe like the only Vision Pro at the time in Iran. And so my co-founder and I at the time at the mobile game studio, we started sort of this reverse bidding war to try to get the price down as far as we could, because it's an expensive headset. But we really wanted to try it, and we managed to actually get it for a very unusually low price, around $1,500 or so. It turns out the guy got it to do some programming for it in Dubai, found it really hard, and brought it back to Iran, and there was no buyers. And so, yeah, we got the headset from him, and yeah, it was like I have spent many hours trying out the Vision Pro, and I have a lot to say about it. It's amazing in terms of like the technology, and as something that can give you a glimpse into what some of the XR future is going to look like. We had been making mobile games for around 8 years or so, I think. We started in 2017. We had our own little mobile game studio. We did small mobile games. We did have a large audience. We made hyper casual mobile games. We had a large global audience. Tens of millions of people played our games. But for me, VR is what I've always wanted to do. I used to play a lot of Oblivion back when I was a kid. And I remember, and this is as close to an VR origin story as I can give you, but I remember like it was a very immersive game. And I remember sitting in front of the flat screen TV and thinking like this is not enough. I want to be actually in that world. I want to be like touching those walls. Like I wanted to live that life actually. So yeah, ever since I got the idea of being a game developer, I wanted to do VR, but the technology wasn't there yet. And so we started with mobile, and after around 8 years, we started doing some prototyping. Well, it actually started with buying the Vision Pro. We got the Vision Pro. There was this hackathon going on. It was a Vision hack, I think. And the hardware was so expensive and the barrier of entry was so high in terms of like developing games for it that we actually got an award at that hackathon because nobody was building anything for the Vision Pro at the time. And we literally built a flower pot you could water and you had to like tend to it. It was a really simple thing, and it got an award. And that's when we knew that, yeah, nobody's building anything for these headsets, the Vision Pro, yet. And so that was the first thing we did. And after that, we moved on to the Meta Quest, which was like the much larger platform. If there was any money to be made, it was going to be on the Meta Quest at the time. And so we made a couple of prototypes, and they didn't turn out to be good games. We play tested them with some people, and they just weren't good games. But then we tried out Not Suspicious previous game, Airspace Defender. And I was immediately like a huge fan. The whole hand tracking interaction thing and the dome, like the hemisphere, we immediately thought it lends itself really well to bringing a lot of game experiences that are typically played on a flat screen to extended reality. And we had this idea of what if we could build like a tabletop strategy game, that sort of works like a board game, which is a mix of maybe Bad North, a little bit of Thronefall, and some Kingdom Rush mixed in. And so we had this idea of building this prototype, and we worked on it for 3 months, and it turned out to be a lot of fun. It was like an experience that worked best in XR as opposed to like its flat screen inspirations. And what happened next was actually really incredible. It was the Persian New Year around March of last year, and I saw Rafael's co-founder's account on LinkedIn, Guillaume, and I was like, yeah, well, these guys made a game that was a huge inspiration to us. Maybe I should just message them up, show them what we're working on, get their advice on what to do next. And as luck would have it, Guillaume sent the video immediately to Rafael. And in a matter of like 1 or 2 days, Rafael came back to us with an offer to publish the game on the Quest platform. And it was fantastic. You know, at the time we had just started doing XR, and it was a great opportunity to work with the guys whose game served as like the original inspiration for our current game. at the time. And yeah, that's where it all started. But what followed next was like even more incredible.
Yeah, I want to get into all that here in a sec. I want to go back for 1 minute and just start with one of my general questions that I ask all of my guests. Can you describe your favorite moment of presence in a headset? What is a standout moment that you maybe your favorite moment inside of a headset that you've ever had?
That's a difficult question because I have a lot of like playtime with VR games, but maybe I'm being a little sentimental here. But playing some of the original immersive VR games that used to be on the Oculus Rift headset back in the day, and I'm trying to think of some of those experiences because when there was this switch to mobile hardware, there was a significant degrade in quality that happened,
Did
and
you
I'm
play
still
Asgard's
getting
Wrath
used to it.
1?
I did, yeah, yeah. That was one of them actually. That was really great because like there were a lot of similarities with other like RPGs that I'm a fan of. Like for instance, like Skyrim. Yeah, Asgard's Wrath was really great, and even some of like the demos, um, uh, uh, some of the original games for the Oculus Rifts, such as like Robo Recall. I don't know if it was called
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking it was probably I was gonna mention Robo I didn't wanna prompt you, but yeah, Robo Recall, and then, what about,
Yeah.
Lone Echo?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of like sci-fi games and like space exploration and all of that stuff. I had a thing for space VR games and experiences. And I remember like Lone Echo was really great, and there was this other thing which was a bit more meditative called ISS something. These were basically the experiences that sold me on the promise of virtual reality. And I think the graphical fidelity still hasn't caught up with what it used to be back then with the PC VR headsets. I mean, of course, there are still PC VR games that you can play now, but I've only been playing on Oculus, like a Meta Quest for a very long time.
Yeah,
And
like
but yeah, that was
Asgard's
the
Wrath
time.
2, did you put time into Asgard's Wrath 2?
Only a couple hours, only a couple hours. To me, it seemed like it needed a significant time investment, and at the time, I was really busy working on Banners and Bastions, and so, yeah, I never got around to it. But it looked nice, I can tell you that.
Yeah. So, I mean, your experience is pretty standard, and I go through this on my podcast occasionally with different people. Asgard's Wrath 1 was so graphically beautiful. All right. It really sold exactly what you were describing. Like, I want to be in an RPG and really enjoy the lights and the colors and these things that I could never see in the real world. I get to see them and they're so beautiful. And then they have to try to recreate that on mobile hardware. And they did an admirable job, but it lacks so much, right? And then they try to attach the kind of mechanics of grinding away in a very open world game. And it just sort of, as you described, you can get a couple hours into it and just not feel where something like Asgard's Wrath 1, you might get 2 hours in and maybe want to take a breath, go outside of the headset for a little while. But like while you're outside of the headset, you sort of remember how pretty it was inside the headset. And you kind of drawn back into it because you can even just take a breath and look around and enjoy just the beauty of being there because it's that visually rich. And so like there's that's what's lost a little bit in my mind when you make the jump to mobile hardware and to graphics. And then you talked about Vision Pro and getting your hands on Vision Pro. And I think about the games that Rafael made and then you've made with Rafael now so much when it comes to the Vision Pro because they seem like a match made in heaven, right? They seem like the perfect apps to play on that hardware, even though there is no user base. There's no market to sell your games to. So it's this awful situation where I want to beg you to put the games on a headset that you're not going to make any money from. And that's kind of the state of the market for so many out there. Very politely saying, well, if I could make money on it, I would. And I totally get that.
As a gamer, this whole shift from PC hardware to mobile hardware has been tough for me, because I used to get some very high quality experiences back when PC VR was the main thing. And I do miss those days. And I didn't mind the heavy headsets and them being connected to like a beefy PC or anything. And so that's me as a gamer. That's what I think as a gamer. But from like a business perspective, the shift to mobile hardware was seemed kind of inevitable, and we were kind of glad that it happened, especially since we were coming from a mobile background. And so coming from mobile, our the way we look at it usually is if this thing is going to go mainstream, what kind of experiences are people going to want on their like lightweight mobile hardware headsets? And so that's where I think a lot of our experience with mobile comes into play really nicely. And so we basically frame it like this: what kind of XR experiences are people going to play on a subway ride, on a train ride? But the problem is right now the majority, I wouldn't say majority, but a large portion of the audience that we have on Quest headsets are gamers, and I would say hardcore gamers. And so the kind of game that you would play on a subway ride, they wouldn't pay for it. And so we're in this difficult situation where we got to make like very intuitive hand tracked experiences with mixed reality that cater both to the audience that currently exists for the Meta Quest hardware, but at the same time can give you a glimpse into what the future of mixed reality games is going to look like. And about the Vision Pro, yeah, we would love to port our games for the Vision Pro or even make new experiences for it, but it's there's just no user base yet. And understandably, I think there's almost no other developer making games and experiences for them. Yeah, unless there's some sort of support from the hardware manufacturers for developers like us. Yeah, I think it's a suicide mission. We would like we're already operating off of our savings, because we love this space so much. We just want to be in it. We want to create. We want to make games. But to try and build something for a hardware where we know the game is not going to sell, it would be suicide.
Yeah, totally get that. And I got into some of those numbers with Rafael a little bit. It's rough to hear those numbers. Let me ask this question. How did you first hear about Airspace Defender in the first place?
Well, I think I read about it on Upload VR, actually. I was looking at because mixed reality was really interesting to us at the time. And so there was this list of the best mixed reality experiences available for MetaQuest at the time. And Airspace Defender got really good coverage on Upload VR. And so we saw their name everywhere and we had to try it out.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing that that might have been the case, and that's what just wanted to ask because yeah, I would have been involved in
Yeah.
making sure that it got on that list, and it's such a powerful idea. And now I want to hear about this journey into working with Raphael directly. Tell me about this journey.
Right. So let me start off by saying that Raphael really is a saint, because he took a lot of risk working with us and he put a lot of trust in us. And, they're a US based company, not suspicious. And one of the biggest problems we had to grapple with from the very start working with them was that we couldn't do any business with them, like officially. And so getting them in trouble was the last thing we wanted to do because like there are numerous sanctions against working with businesses that are based in Iran. And we didn't want to like go into that territory. Like we didn't want to get them into trouble. And so incredibly, we did this whole thing with no contract. We didn't get a single dollar from the game sales. It's practically not suspicious game. We almost like didn't exist until very recently. And after the game was finally fully released, after it came out of early access, we did want to like make it official. And so we started looking into places where we could relocate the team. And we looked at a couple places in Europe. We were considering the Netherlands and Finland. And of course, if we had a choice, then we would certainly have considered the US, but there's this whole blanket travel ban in place right now. We can't even visit. So the US wasn't an option. And at the same time, Raphael had his own plans without even telling us. And that's another incredible thing. And we started the paperwork for Finland because like our final decision was that was the best place we could be. Like it's got a great game industry. It's a great place to live. And turns out Raphael had the exact same thing in mind. he was going to relocate to Finland. And so we started the paperwork, we got accepted. And as luck would have it, I think the war between Iran and the US broke out on a Saturday, I think. The Thursday, I think it was like 2 days before the war broke out, we were at the Finnish embassy finalizing everything for our residence permits to come to Finland. And the day after we got accepted for 1 year in Finland, and on that same Saturday, war broke out, and we got stuck in Iran for around 40 days because the borders were closed. It wasn't safe to travel, and we were just waiting for an opportunity to get out of there as soon as we could. And it was horrific. Like it was the most horrific experience of our lives, hands down. Being in a war. Yeah, I could tell you more about it. But yeah, we as soon as there was this ceasefire, we booked our bus tickets, and yeah, it's funny that it was like we had to cross the border using a bus, and so we booked our bus tickets to Armenia. We crossed the ground border from Iran into Armenia, and it was like something straight out of like a World War II movie. And we crossed, like it was raining. We crossed the ground border. We had to walk a lot. And yeah, once we were in Armenia, we stayed there for a couple of days. Then we took a flight to Istanbul and then to Helsinki. And Rafael was waiting for us in Helsinki. And he had to wait for us a little bit longer than we expected because we were questioned for for a very long time at the Helsinki airport. I was questioned for an hour and a half. Even though I had like a valid residence permit, I was questioned for an hour and a half. It's the Iranian passport, I guess. Gets me in trouble everywhere I go. But yeah, Rafael and his partner came to pick us at the airport. We took the first train to Salo, where we are now. And yeah, things are great now. We're looking for an apartment. We're looking for office space. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. We're still discovering Finland a little bit.
How many times have you been outside of Iran before this?
Well, before this, I've been to Istanbul, Dubai, and Tokyo, but that's the only three places I've ever been.
I'm speaking with very broad strokes here. This isn't true of all Americans, but by and large, they're a very um, there's a lot of people in America that have never been outside of America, never been outside the United States. And in many cases, they've never been further than their own hometown or their home state. They maybe have a car and have gone to out of state a couple times on a trip or Disneyland or Disney World or something like that, but just not a lot of global knowledge inside the United States. We like to think that we're worldly and understand the world. If I would imagine that for a non-zero number of people listening to this podcast, they probably have not heard from an Iranian about what it was like to live through this recent war, the bombings, and what you just sort of hinted at there, this journey of leaving the country doesn't even really talk about the reality of what happened. And so I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit what it's like to people who have very little understanding of global relations, even maybe why this is happening, what it was like to be a software developer in this country as this starts happening around you.
I could start off by saying, like, until very recently, before the war broke out, Iran didn't used to be that bad a place to live in. We got really good at education. We were doing software development. We were doing cutting edge mixed reality development, and the situation wasn't that bad in Iran. And so we actually had like a very westernized lifestyle. And I think the gist of what our lives used to be about was that we just wanted to make games. I personally just wanted to make games, and Iran wasn't that bad a place to be to make games. But very recently, like there were big issues with the economy. There were a lot of protests. And the last thing that happened, the war, I mean, both of the wars, there was this 12-day war, which was horrible, but we didn't get to experience a lot of the bombings firsthand. We were fortunate to not have to experience all that stuff. But this last war, it was horrific. It was horrific. And where we were living in Tehran, which is the capital, of Iran. I think around half of all of the attacks were focused on Tehran. And we happened to live in a place where we didn't know this, but like it turned out that there were a lot of military facilities very close to where we were living. And so for somebody who just wants to make video games, to have the experience of like hearing rockets fly over your house and strike somewhere really close to you, like the whole ground shaking with windows on the verge of shattering. It was the single most horrific experience of my life. I never wanted to have anything to do with any of this, politics, war. We just wanted to make games. And yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard, but I'm glad we're past it now. Of course, my heart is still with my family and friends who are still back in Iran. All of Iran is right now in this big limbo where they don't know what's going to happen to them, whether this ongoing ceasefire. And like you said, to people maybe in the US or in some other calm countries around the world, the war is just something you hear about on the news. But Iran is like a nation of 90 million people, and the consequences of the war are very real. We felt the bombings, like it's horrific. Yeah, that's what I have to say about it. It was really horrific, and I never thought uh, I would be in a war situation in my life. But yeah, it happened.
I want to speak for people who just want to play games. And it's very hard to be in this space where we're talking about literally virtual reality, a place that doesn't exist except when you put on the headset. And then to have the foundations of your building shake because of decisions being made at very high levels with very large disconnects between that individual experience and very big, very big trends and decisions being made disconnected from this uh, on the ground life you're trying to live. What I try to do with my podcast and what I try to do with my whole site, what I tried to do at Upload VR, but what I'm trying to do now is humanizing this industry and the people who make it. And I thank you so much for sharing your journey here and talking about it with me. What I was trying to hint at is I imagine that there's a fair number of people who have never heard the direct experience of someone who went through this. I thank you for sharing that and getting that experience out there so that people can
It's my
know that
pleasure.
there's actual people who experience this. One of the things that I think you didn't mention directly, but I did want to cover, you had to be out of contact with Rafael for large periods of time, right?
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true, especially in this war that's still going on. I mean, there's still no internet connection in Iran. And so on the Saturday that the war started, as soon as we saw like the first missile hitting Tehran, I I got down to my computer as fast as I could. Wrote up an email to Rafael, and I said, "Yeah, it appears that Iran has been struck. I'm probably not going to have an internet access for a while, but I'll try to keep you posted." And that was it. I didn't get to talk to him for like 2 weeks after, when I got just a tiny bit of internet connection, and I had a chat with him on WhatsApp for around like 10 minutes or so. And then we got cut off again. And yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard. Uh, it all worked out in the end. It all worked out in the end. We did communicate the stuff that we needed. Like we did make the arrangements that we needed to make in order to have a, like, I don't know, in order to move to Finland. That was the whole focus at the time, because we were accepted for a residence permit. It was just a matter of like logistics. When can we cross the border? When, like, which flights do we need to book? And that was it. That was all the communication we had. And of course, all the work had to stop. We had a lot of commitments to Meta, to Pico, which we couldn't deliver on. But yeah, it was what it was. We couldn't get any work done. We're past it now.
So you're normally developing behind a computer, right?
We were all at the office, and we actually wanted to celebrate. We actually wanted to celebrate our being accepted for a residence permit in Finland. It was going to be our next big move. And we wanted to celebrate, and we just looked out the window. We heard something, and we looked out the window, and in the distance, we saw what was unmistakably a missile strike. And yeah, that's when we knew. That's when we knew, and yeah, all hell broke loose after that.
Whew. So The other side of this is I heard from Raphael the sort of trust, like you called him a saint, I think was the word you used. But he also used very flattering words to describe the faith that you had to put in him to sort of wait for this to come together. You had to put your trust in another developer in another country who you've never met to follow through on his promises to you. Is that the case? And how did that feel from your side to have to put all this trust in basically a lifeline outside of the country who you've never met?
It really did take a little bit of trust on our side as well. It is true what you're saying, to trust somebody whom we've never met and whom we can't have an official contract with. We're just giving our game away for free, hoping for the best. It did get a lot of trust. It was a two-way thing. When I try to put myself in Raphael's shoes, working with a group of people in Iran, I wouldn't know how I would have reacted had I been in his shoes. And he stuck with us, through thick and thin. Like you said, there were these whole big periods of time where we were like absolutely disconnected, and he just had to hope and put his trust in us that we would come back and continue the work. And I never had any reservations about whether to trust him or not. We just clicked from the start, and that was an incredible thing.
Let's get back to what you're hoping for out of the VR space and headsets. What are you working on now, and what do you want to see in VR in the future?
Well, there are a couple of things that we didn't get around to doing for Banners and Bastions that we're about to get to now. I think we're gonna keep working on it for around a month or two. And there's this whole, and yeah, this is actually a very funny thing that Airspace Defender, which served as the original inspiration for Banners and Bastions, we are going to get to work on it now. We're going to be the team working on it, and we're going to get it to full release, and then we're going to do a full Pico port for it. So once we're done with that, we were already, like before the war happened, we were already prototyping some new ideas, which I'm excited to share with you, but maybe I shouldn't. But yeah, as soon as we're done with Airspace Defender and Banners and Bastions, which is going to be in the next 2 to 3 months, we have some exciting ideas to work on. And yeah, I think we're going to try a multiplayer experience. That's as far as I can share.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, multiplayer is always a big lift. So good luck to you on that one. And that's really interesting to hear full circle there on Airspace Defender. When I started to hear about this story of you making this journey out of Iran and the war that's happening there and bombs destroying large areas of the country, and then thinking about this game, Airspace Defender Missile Command, it's very hard to sort of keep all these ideas in my head, right? Here's this game that is a fictional depiction of what you're actually experiencing. In a very real way, and it's very interesting to hear that you're going to be working on that, and I can't wait to see the updates there. The VR market is such a weird place here. It's going to take, I think, years to go by for us to kind of look back and understand what was being built during this period. There's a lot of negativity out there right now, a lot of assumptions that this market is dead, that it was almost a mistake. You go to mainstream press, and it's like you've been trying to make something happen that hasn't happened for a decade now, is the way it looks, and it's like there's plenty of people out there that kind of want to jump on a bandwagon and say, ha ha ha, this market, like VR is never going to happen. If it hasn't happened so far, it's never going to happen. But there's very real things that kind of affect individual developers like yourself and Raphael. The whole Horizon Worlds push, it was really tough to go to like MetaConnect and speak to the person who's in charge of mixed reality efforts, who's got that title of being in charge of everything, and to interview them and like ask them the question, do you see a problem with there being both Horizon Worlds being promoted and individual developers who have made paid games? And hear this, very, I don't know, level-headed corporate speak back at me where it's just like, no, I don't see a problem with that. I see a place where both of these things can exist. And to just know that that's BS. Like to know in my heart, like, come on, man, be
Yeah.
real about it. Like, you're, it's like the slow motion train wreck to watch from afar, where it's like, no, you're pushing slop in front of real developers who have put their lives on the line in order to ship these projects. And there was a period there for a couple of years where Meta had a robust release schedule. There were 2 to 4 games coming out every week, and every one of them was well thought out and carefully sort of vetted to make sure it was good.
Yeah.
Then they just sort of ripped that out of the strategy and pushed everything out onto the store and stopped doing that, stopped promoting this incredible work. And so, like, there was another pass there where Airspace Defender and Banners and Bastions ended up on the release calendar and gave you sort of a target to shoot for, a date to make, and make sure all your bugs are out by, a month before release, make sure all your bugs are free and you're ready for 1.0 release. And like, that was for a while there were devs making hiring decisions and able to grow their studios because they had that reliability of a game console that was actually like caring about its dev community and really supporting them. Now, bringing that back to present, right? Like, I see this rebuilding period happening where it seems like the platforms are still there and supporting good devs to some extent, but we haven't seen the products that are going to come on the other side of this. We don't know the price ranges that we're going to hit. Meta has been so stuck in this place where they need to ship something between $200 and $600. They only ever shipped one headset that was outside that price range, and it did not do well. So there's all this frustration and confusion amongst people who are like, wait, if it's priced $1,000, I'm not interested. Even though there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be very interested if the product is really good and it plays all these amazing experiences we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, right? If you get to play Asgard's Wrath 1 again and get to play all these updated PC games, like, there's a lot of opportunity here for really neat things to happen in the next couple of years in the VR space, but it's hard for people to see it right now because there's just sort of like, I think the deals are getting made now, and the hardware is not getting shipped yet to many people, so they can't see sort of that there's a light at the end of the tunnel here for quality hardware and great experiences to have on that quality hardware. So I do
Right.
think of your stuff that you're working on as stuff to watch, as projects that we want to see hit on this new hardware in a really
Thank you.
meaningful way. Is there anything else about your journey that you want people to hear about today?
Well, of course, there's a lot more I could say, but I think I did cover most of what I wanted to say. But about the last thing you mentioned about the state of the industry right now, I'm feeling like the separation of the Horizon Worlds and of the Quest store was a good thing that finally happened. We haven't seen the results yet, in terms of like our game's exposure or its sales. There's been no change. But I take that as a good thing that's going to happen. But the way we see it is that until the end of 2026, when there are a couple of new headsets that are going to come out, we just want to hold on for dear life. We're trying to get all the funding we can. We're trying to work as closely we can with the hardware manufacturers so that we can get our hands on their dev kits, the early versions of the hardware they're currently making. But yeah, we're still firm believers in the inevitability of an XR future. We just hope that there's not going to be another XR winter between now and when XR is going to be mainstream.
Before we close out here, what's been different about being face to face with your colleague?
Yeah, so I wish I could tell you more about it, but since we don't have an office yet, we still haven't gotten that experience of like sitting next to each other and working on a game. I don't have a lot to tell you about.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm sure it's going to be great because we used to work remotely on our mobile games for around 5 years, and then we got an office and got to work in person. And yeah, we can't go back. And so yeah, I imagine it's going to be the same thing. Getting to sit by Raphael, working together on some stuff. Yeah, it's going to be It's going to be really great.
You brought out another dev. Is that right? That another dev followed you after you guys made it? You waited for them to make it there as well?
It's true. It's true. They came here a week after we got here, and yeah, we're all just settling in at the moment. But yeah, starting on May 1st, I think we're gonna have our office, and yeah, work can officially start again.
If you had an unlimited budget and could make anything you'd want, what would you make in VR?
All right, so this is something we've been talking about a lot with Rafael. I'm a big fan of dungeon crawlers and roguelikes, and I played a lot of Diablo. And we had this if we had unlimited budget, then we would for sure make a multiplayer dungeon crawler where people can sit around the table, at least virtually, and go around killing monsters, building out their own characters, experiencing these stories, looting stuff, the whole dungeon crawler experience. And so yeah, if we had unlimited budget, that would be the next thing we could do.
I want to hear a specific memory you had in VR, your favorite sort of moment in headset. If it isn't your favorite moment or you can't think of it offhand, you get like too much pressure trying to think of that one best. Just describe for me a moment where you felt like you were in virtual reality and you felt completely immersed and felt present in that other space.
It's all coming back to me now. I think I needed an hour for it to come back to me, but I remember that there was this, and it's a shame that I don't remember the name of this thing, but there was this space simulation experience where you could jump on a spaceship and go like fly to different planets and like explore space. And I remember there was this moment uh, where I was flying close to the sun, and I remember like just seeing how massive it was and how small I was, and just knowing that this was an experience that could only happen in VR.
Ti
Yeah, I remember
Titans
I
of Space
actually
by chance?
cried. What was that again?
Titans of
Was
Space
that?
by chance?
Yeah, yeah, Titans of Space. Yes, yes, yes. That's it. That's it. Yeah, Titans of Space. Yeah, and I remember in that moment, I like tears came to my eyes, and I thought to myself, yeah, this is an experience that I could only have in VR, and yeah, I'll never
Yeah.
forget it.
I love it. And yeah, what a beautiful way to close this out. That's Steve Drash VR. I remember going to, I think it was SIGGRAPH many, many years ago when I think it was before Facebook bought Oculus, and they had a little Oculus booth in the back of the SIGGRAPH conference area, and I waited a little while to go into the booth, and I remember like some journalist was being exited from the room before me, and whoever was the rep was like, I apologize for that. That was not great for the person that had come before me, because I think they really didn't get VR. They didn't understand it. They were asking weird questions. And then I come into the room and I sit down, and I know that they've got, I think it was the HD prototype was the headset that they had. And that's what I was trying to find at this particular conference. And I'm like, can you put me in Titans of Space? They had like a couple demos that they were like ready to put in. And they're like, yeah, I don't know if it'll run on this new HD prototype, but we can try. And they launched Titans of Space over there because I had already tried it on a different headset. And here I am getting to see Titans of Space on a higher res panel for the first time, and it does work magically, even though they
Oh
hadn't
wow.
really planned on showing me it. And I'm looking around. That experience is one of my favorites. It comes with my highest recommendations for the medium. If you haven't tried Titans of Space, it's pure magic. And Sahand here just describing the exact same thing that has wowed me about this medium for many, many years. If you ever go look at a textbook about space exploration, you'll usually find like a page in the middle of the book where they'll show the scale of the solar system, and they'll have all the different planets to scale with one another. And you'll see how big Jupiter is next to Earth. You'll see how tiny it is. And they're like, this is how big Jupiter is in comparison to Earth. And then off on the right side of the page, you'll see the sun, and it'll be cut off on the page because there's simply no way to represent how big the sun is in comparison to the Earth and Jupiter in a textbook. But you get into Titans of Space and you might have tears rolling down your eyes, just like Sahan described, within 10 seconds of putting it on. And you look in front of you and you see our little planet there. You see the moon floating around it. and then you turn your head to the right and you see the sun and you see how enormous it is. And if you don't believe in this medium, or if you've never tried this medium before, you try something like Titans of Space, and your brain will open, your mind will open to the idea that there's simply nothing else like it, right?
Yeah, very true. Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you for the time, Sahand, for sharing your story, and
Thanks
good
for
luck
having
there in
me.
Finland.
This has been great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess I'll be talking to you again, hopefully
Yeah,
soon.
let's talk as soon as you have more to release, please. That's actually a suggestion I have from my audience member is if I have you back, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I see from your work that you go a lot in depth about the whole philosophy behind mixed reality, hand tracking, and like what the future is going to hold. And I'm really eager to talk to you more about it because that's something which we tend to explore a lot. We brainstorm a lot about it, and yeah, I hope we can talk more about it in the future.
Sounds great. All right, I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.